Everything that you will need to create this DIY project will be listed in the description box, as well as all the equipment used and also the lengths that were used in order to create this particular size of bench. You're first going to create the legs and support needed for the bench, with 4 lengths cut at the same 15-degree angles either end, and the 4 middle smaller support sections cut at opposite angles, still set to 15 degrees. For the main bench seat, I used an old scaffold board to give me a head start with a rustic look, but you can use any type of wood as we will use different techniques to achieve that rustic effect. To create the angled cuts, we used a mitre saw, setting the angle to 15 degrees, but you can use a much simpler tool such as a protractor to set and mark out your angles, and use a handheld saw. Again, I will link everything down in the description box. So starting with the main legs for the bench, keeping the same 15-degree angle for all ends, I measured them all at 18 inches in length. Once the main legs were cut, we measured out for the support pieces, which will sit in between with a smaller piece at the top. We made ours 4 inches at its widest and the lower piece at 10 inches at its widest. These pieces will be cut at opposite 15-degree angles either end, so we made the first cut and now are switching to the opposite 15-degree angle on the mitre saw. We then removed the metal edge from the old scaffold board to cut it to size, and we made ours 52 inches in length. So once all the cuts have been made, you should have the 4 main legs, the 2 sizes of the support pieces, ready to place together in order to create this A structure. To start by fixing these pieces together, it's important to first pre-drill your holes using a drill bit. This will stop the wood from splitting when you add the screws. This was probably the most tricky, as you need to create the angle between the 2 pieces of wood. So if you do have someone available to help you, or if you have a clamp to hold the pieces together, it's really useful. Again, pre-drilling through both pieces of wood and then adding the screws at an angle to connect the pieces together. Once put together, they should stand quite comfortably on their own and again form this A-type structure. Moving on now to the main bench seat, I'm marking out how far in the legs will sit. I actually sat mine at 6 inches from either end. I then placed the legs and measured either end to ensure it was sat centrally. I then marked around this with a pencil to make it easier to attach into the correct place. Remove the smaller support piece to make it easier to connect the legs to the bench seat, and again pre-drill the holes and then attach the screws. Then reapply the smaller support piece again, and our bench is now ready for styling. To begin to create the rustic look, I used these wire brushes, which you can attach to a handheld drill. You can get different sizes, and although this did create some unevenness to the bench and roughed up the wood a little bit, I actually think that I was much more able to achieve this look by using a slightly different technique. I actually found using the claw side of a hammer one of the most effective ways of achieving that rustic and worn look. So I definitely recommend using this to rough up wood, especially if you haven't started with something like a scaffold board and you really want to achieve that worn look with your bench. And another technique I found really useful again was just using a hammer and chisel. Really effective at especially getting a little bit more of a rustic look and worn look. I used this along the main parts of the benches to really gouge out some of the wood, and then really applied it to the legs because I hadn't used any kind of worn wood for the legs, and this really helped. So you can really tailor this to how rustic and worn you would like your finished bench to look, but remember that this will be sanded back. So I kept adding to mine because I really did want it to look rustic and quite aged, but again, you can always add to it as you're sanding back. If you don't feel like you've achieved as rustic a look as you like, you can always go back in and add some more to it. Once you are happy with the look of your bench, then it's time to sand it down. I used an electric sander because it's just a lot quicker, and paid specific attention to the top half and around the sides because I'd really got mine to look quite rustic around the edges, which I really loved. And then just giving the bench a good wipe down with a damp cloth in order to prepare it ready for staining. I do feel like my clothing is saying a lot about how crazy the English weather can be in the summer. I started off in a dress in one of the hottest days of the year, and now the next day I am continuing the project in a jumper and some wellies. Now on to staining. I used the Frenchic antique browning wax. I used a cloth and a paintbrush to work this wax into the wood, and this was the first time I have used this. I did find the best way to apply it was actually to use a paintbrush to first put it on and then to buff it into the wood using a cloth. This is the final finished result, and I am super happy with it. I've just styled mine up in my lounge. Do let me know what you guys think, and please let me know if you have a go at doing this project yourself. I would love to see your pictures, and thank you so much for watching.